Can you believe that today, for the first time, young adults are poorer than their parents at the same age? Astonishingly, a recent report from the Federal Reserve Bank reveals that the wealth chasm between generations is wider than ever before. This isn't a localized issue confined to a single country or region. No, this is a global phenomenon, a seismic shift in the distribution of wealth. Let's delve into how we got here and what this means for our economy. First, let's travel back to the post-World War II era, a golden age for baby boomers. This was a time when the world was on the cusp of change, economies were on the upswing, and opportunities were rife. Baby boomers, those born between 1946 and 1964, lived through an era of unprecedented economic prosperity. It was a time when the American dream was more than just a dream. It was a tangible reality. Jobs were plentiful, wages were high, and the cost of living was relatively low. This allowed baby boomers to save and invest, paving the way for their financial stability. Education, a key stepping stone to upward mobility, was vastly more affordable for baby boomers than for subsequent generations. Tuition fees were a fraction of what they are today, making a college degree an attainable goal for many. This opened up a world of opportunities, enabling baby boomers to secure high-paying jobs and build their careers. The housing market also played a significant role in the financial success of baby boomers. In the mid-20th century, housing was not just affordable, it was an investment. A booming housing market meant that baby boomers could buy homes, watch their value increase over time, and ultimately sell them for a substantial profit. Homeownership was a powerful wealth-building tool, one that contributed significantly to the financial stability of this generation. Yet, it wasn't just the economic prosperity that set baby boomers apart. It was their ability to capitalize on these opportunities, to invest wisely, and to lay the groundwork for their future wealth. They made the most of the strong economies, affordable education, and thriving housing market that characterized their era. Baby boomers managed to amass wealth at a rate that was unheard of for previous generations and has been elusive for those that followed. Their financial success wasn't just a product of the times, but a testament to their strategic planning and financial acumen. This generation laid the foundation for their wealth early in their careers. They seized the opportunities that came their way, setting the stage for a financially secure future and leaving a legacy that continues to shape the economic landscape today. Fast forward to Generation X, those born roughly between the mid-1960s and early 1980s. This generation, often overlooked in favor of the more sizable baby boomers and millennials, found themselves caught in the crossfire of severe economic events. The first of these was the dot-com bubble burst in the early 2000s. This was a time when the internet was young, and optimism was sky-high. Many from Generation X invested heavily in internet-based companies, dreaming of instant wealth. However, when the bubble burst, it led to a massive loss of wealth for many in this generation. Generation X was just beginning to recover when they were hit by the 2008 financial crisis. This global economic downturn was one of the most severe since the Great Depression. Many Gen Xers were in their prime earning years, and this crisis significantly affected their wealth accumulation. Jobs were lost, homes were foreclosed, and savings were wiped out. In addition to these economic calamities, Generation X also faced the burden of student loan debt, which was much higher than that of the previous generation. The cost of education skyrocketed during their time, leaving many with debt that they're still paying off today. The economic challenges faced by Generation X had far-reaching implications. It wasn't just about the loss of wealth. It was about the loss of financial security and stability. Many Gen Xers had to delay milestones such as buying a home, starting a family, or saving for retirement. Furthermore, these challenges had ripple effects on the economy as a whole. The reduced spending power of Generation X led to slower economic growth. Their inability to invest in real estate or the stock market also had a dampening effect on these sectors. Unfortunately, Gen X had to bear the brunt of economic instability. Not only did they face significant economic challenges, but these events also hindered their ability to accumulate wealth in the same way as the previous generation. This has led to a wealth gap that continues to persist today. Now let's examine the millennials, those born between 1981 and 1996. Imagine growing up in an era of economic prosperity, of technological advancement, of global connectedness, and then, right as you're stepping into the world as an independent adult, the floor drops out from under you. That's the story of the millennials. It's no secret, millennials have had to face some significant economic hurdles. Let's start with soaring student debt. For many millennials, pursuing higher education has become synonymous with accumulating a mountain of debt. Education, once seen as a pathway to upward mobility, has now become a financial burden for many in this generation. Then we have the issue of high housing prices. The dream of owning a home, a cornerstone of the American dream, is drifting further and further out of reach for many millennials. With housing prices skyrocketing, particularly in urban areas, the ability to afford a home is becoming increasingly elusive for this generation. And let's not forget about stagnant wages. Despite being the most educated generation in history, millennials are facing a labor market where wages have remained relatively flat, failing to keep pace with the rising cost of living. This wage stagnation, coupled with increased living costs, is squeezing millennials out of the wealth accumulation game. These factors, among others, have made it harder for millennials to accumulate wealth. They've been dubbed the boomerang generation because many, out of necessity, have had to return to live with their parents, a stark contrast to the independence and financial stability enjoyed by previous generations at the same age. The economic challenges facing millennials are not just personal struggles, they are systemic issues that highlight the growing wealth gap in our society. The economic landscape for millennials is fraught with challenges, making it harder for them to achieve financial stability and accumulate wealth. Millennials are facing a tougher economic landscape than their predecessors. It's not about blaming the individual or the generation, but rather about understanding the broader economic shifts that have placed millennials in this precarious position. Finally, let's look at Generation Z, those born after 1996. These digital natives are stepping into a world that's vastly different from the one their predecessors knew. They're the first generation to grow up with smartphones as a given, not a luxury. But beyond the tech-savvy surface, there are deep economic challenges that this generation is grappling with. One of the most significant issues for Gen Z is the lingering impact of the COVID-19 pandemic. It's not just a health crisis, it's a financial one too. With lockdowns and business closures around the globe, job prospects for young people have been severely dented. Many Gen Zers were just starting their careers or still in education when the pandemic hit, disrupting their plans and putting a damper on their earning potential. But it's not only about the immediate aftermath. The pandemic's ripple effects are anticipated to cause long-term economic instability. This could mean fewer job opportunities, lower wages, and less financial security for Gen Z in the years to come. It's a daunting prospect, especially when you consider that this generation is already battling with the burden of student loans and skyrocketing living costs. All these factors could potentially widen the wealth gap even further. It's a sobering thought. While Gen Z is often praised for their entrepreneurial spirit and innovative mindset, these qualities alone may not be enough to overcome structural economic hurdles. In terms of wealth accumulation, Generation Z is starting on the back foot. They're entering the workforce at a time of economic uncertainty with higher education costs and living expenses than ever before. The deck, it seems, is stacked against them. Nevertheless, Gen Z is not a generation to be underestimated. They're resilient, adaptable, and have a keen sense of social justice. They're not just passive observers of their economic predicament, they're actively seeking ways to change it. Despite these challenges, one thing is clear: Gen Z is not sitting idly by. They're taking matters into their own hands, seeking innovative solutions and pushing for systemic change. But the road ahead is steep, and the economic landscape is shifting beneath their feet. Gen Z is entering an uncertain economic future. So, what does this growing wealth gap between generations mean for our economies? For starters, let's consider consumer spending, the lifeblood of any thriving economy. When the wealth is concentrated in the hands of the older generations, there's less disposable income for younger folks to pump back into the economy. Imagine a 20-something, saddled with student loans, trying to pay rent and save for a rainy day. There isn't much left for discretionary spending, is there? With less consumer spending, businesses face slower growth, potential layoffs, and even bankruptcy. Besides, the wealth gap can trigger slower economic growth. Young people tend to be risk takers, starting businesses and creating jobs. However, without the necessary capital, these entrepreneurial ventures can't take off. This lack of new business formation stifles innovation and hampers economic growth. Now let's talk about government debt. With the aging population living longer and relying on Social Security and healthcare benefits, government expenditure is set to skyrocket. But with the younger generations earning less, there's a smaller tax base to support these growing costs. The result? A ballooning government debt that could destabilize economies. And then, there's the potential for social unrest and political instability. A wealth gap can breed resentment and disillusionment, leading to protests and social unrest. It can also cause political instability, as different generations have diverging interests and priorities, leading to conflicts and policy paralysis. Lastly, there's the issue of intergenerational equity. It's a fundamental principle that each generation should have an equal opportunity to succeed. But the growing wealth gap is undermining this principle, creating a society where your birth year determines your economic prospects. In conclusion, the wealth gap isn't just about dollars and cents, it's about the health of our economies, the stability of our societies, and the fairness of our social contracts. This wealth gap could have far-reaching consequences for our economies and societies. What does the future hold for this wealth gap? It's a question that has been echoing across generations, and the answer lies in our hands. To tackle this vast wealth disparity, we need to address it from multiple angles. First and foremost, policy changes are essential. Governments worldwide should consider implementing progressive tax systems where the wealthy are taxed more heavily than the less affluent. This approach isn't about punishing success, it's about ensuring everyone gets a fair shot at prosperity. Another powerful tool in our arsenal is education reform. The traditional model of education has been proven insufficient in preparing young people for the realities of today's economic landscape. We need to shift our focus to teaching practical skills like entrepreneurship and financial management. Schools should not only be places for learning academic theories, but also breeding grounds for future innovators and leaders. Increased financial literacy is another key aspect of narrowing the wealth gap. Often people are not poor because they lack money, but because they lack financial knowledge. By teaching everyone, not just the privileged, about investing, budgeting, and understanding financial markets, we can empower them to make informed decisions about their money. Furthermore, we must encourage and incentivize businesses to pay living wages. It's not enough to have a job. People need to earn enough to live on, save, and invest. A shift in corporate culture towards prioritizing employees' well-being over short-term profits can go a long way in addressing income inequality. Finally, we should foster an environment that supports innovation and entrepreneurship. After all, new businesses create jobs, drive economic growth, and can lead to wealth creation for many, not just a select few. While the wealth gap is a significant issue, it's not insurmountable. It's up to us to make the necessary changes to create a more equitable future. As we move forward, let's remember that the wealth gap didn't widen overnight, and it won't narrow overnight either, but with concerted effort and collective will, we can shape a future where prosperity is shared, not hoarded. To wrap up, it's clear that the wealth gap between generations is widening. We've delved into the economic realities of the baby boomers, Generation X, millennials, and Gen Z. Each generation has faced unique challenges, leading to a deepening divide in wealth. This is not just a societal issue, but one that affects our economies, as consumption patterns change and wealth concentration becomes more pronounced. It's crucial to understand these trends and work towards solutions for the sake of our economies and future generations.